disgusting. Spin-offs are literally the definition of banking in on a fan's love for your already established franchise. And why shouldn't they? It must be every RP's dream to be able to release anything with their characters on it and just watch it fly off the store shelves. Spin-off games are a strange case, however, because sometimes the gameplay can be so far removed from the core series that you wonder why it was even made with the same name in mind. It can work both ways, however, as sometimes spin-offs give you something the main games can't. For example, look at games like Paper Mario, one of the many spin-off games in the Mario franchise, but one of the only ones to really expand on the world of Mario and its characters. This can create entirely new experiences, which can result in the games becoming even more beloved than the main games themselves. They can even grow into their own franchise, just look at games like Persona. So today we're going to be looking at one of these spin-offs that have become their own series, and in some ways it outshines the games it owes its existence to, and in this case it's Pokémon Mystery Dungeon. So Mystery Dungeon, I'm fairly sure I first saw on the old official Pokémon website, or Cerebi. It was a dungeon crawler in which you, a human, turns into a Pokémon. Now in 2006 when this game came out was when my love for the series was at its peak, so I would have bought a steaming bag of shit if I had a Pikachu's face on it, or as I had no money, asked for it for Christmas. Like many titles in the main series, the game was split into two, Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team. Not only did each version have different Pokémon appear like the main games, but each game released for different hardware, Red Rescue Team for the GBA and Blue Rescue Team for the somewhat new DS. Now both me and my sister had actually asked for DS's for Christmas, but I wanted to play Mystery Dungeon so damn badly that I still asked for Red Rescue Team, just in case I didn't get a DS. And still my mum will be like, "Are you sure, Ben? I think you're gonna get one," but I was taking no chances. Now at the time I was slightly jealous of my sister for having the game for the new system. I did actually end up getting a DS, but I don't regret playing Red for reasons I'll get into in a bit. So Pokemon isn't actually the first game to get the Mystery Dungeon treatment. I believe the first one to do so was Torneko no Daiboken. Did I do that? Was that correct? A 1993 game for the SNES. Chunsoft has also developed Mystery Dungeon games for series like Final Fantasy with the Chocobo Mystery Dungeon games. From what I can gather, the gameplay of these games is pretty similar no matter which series you decide to play, with the aim of getting through each randomly generated dungeon while defeating enemies and gathering items to not only help you throughout the dungeon, but in Pokemon's case, learn new moves and abilities too. Well, let's first touch on one aspect of Mystery Dungeon that I think we can all agree does better than the main games: the stories. Being the first game in the series, Red and Blue Rescue Team definitely have the most basic story, but it does the job and is enjoyable enough to keep you engaged. It starts off with you one day turning into a Pokemon, decided by a personality quiz. This is also something the strategy guide came in big help for, since if you want to become a certain Pokemon, you had to answer these questions in very specific ways. I just thought, screw it with this playthrough though, and just went with what came naturally. I'm naive. I'm highly curious and like valuable things. My cheerful and carefree attitude should make things fun for the people around me. I have one flaw. I'm childish, and I can also be selfish, so I should watch myself. So I'm Totodile.
You cut me deep, Shrek. You cut me real deep just now.
My partner will always be Pikachu, though. Always. He even finds my name funny. Thanks, buddy. So after being found by your partner, it's not long before they ask you to form a rescue team. Natural disasters have been becoming more frequent around the world, and Pokemon are finding themselves in need of saving more and more, especially because mysterious mystery dungeons have been sprouting up all over the place. Now before I continue further, I do just want to say that I'm going to be showing story spoilers in this video, so there's your warning. Now it does evolve into a saving the world story, of course, but the characters that are introduced and the scenarios you might find yourself in are a lot more compelling than you might be used to for a Pokemon game. You have recurring villains with backstories and interesting motivations, you have plot twists and allies turned enemies. All the things you might expect from a story-heavy JRPG actually. But it's told pretty well in this 10 to 15 hour story, and the best part is it's not even the best this series has to offer. But it's still good all the same. Just gotta remember that at the time, this was the first game to really give Pokemon a story that was more than bad guy wants to steal Pokemon to rule the world. This was the first video game to make me absolutely cry my eyes out, and for good reason too. The game, it just makes you care, and the music's absolutely spot on. After the main adventure is over, the post-game offers even more detail and revelations on some characters and their stories, like Gengar and Gardevoir. What has always bugged me about the post-game, however, is that you'll be able to pick any Pokemon to be the leader of your team. So you can play as anyone essentially, but because of this, you and your partner Pokemon barely interact anymore and don't have much dialogue. And when you do, it's just generic sentences like you've never met. Just love me! Now it's kind of hard to explain the gameplay of Mystery Dungeon because of how simple it seems. It really is just walking through randomly generated dungeons, defeating Pokemon and trying to find the stairs on each floor to make your way to the top or the bottom, usually fighting a boss at the end. The series does have a reputation of being repetitive and sometimes monotonous, and I can't really argue with that. For me though, you end up getting into this really addictive gameplay loop, gathering items, getting stronger, learning new moves, expanding your team and just gaining more tools to make the journey easier. Even though the dungeons are randomly generated, a lot of them seem to have certain formations that they will favour. I clearly remember dungeons like Lapis Cave having big rooms and short corridors, while Mount Thunder has a lot of dead-end squares, and Magma Cavern Sky Tower, they seem to feature a lot of cross-sections, so there is an attempt to make each place feel somewhat different. You can think of the game as almost like a real-time strategy, I think. The dungeons are laid out into tiles, moving one tile means taking one turn, so if you see a group of enemies in front of you, you're going to want to plan ahead, like a real-time strategy game. Do you have any moves that can hit across multiple tiles? Do you have an item you can throw? Should you tell the team to make a hasty retreat? Mystery Dungeon does require a fair bit of micromanagement, not just with your items, but also changing your teammates' behaviour with the tactics options, and also their IQ skills. IQ skills can be obtained by you and your teammates by eating these Bertie Bott's every flavour beans, otherwise known as gummies. Depending on the colour, the Pokemon's IQ will raise a little or a lot, and after enough they'll learn new abilities. And there's some really fun ones here once you've grinded enough gummies, which trust me is quite a big grind. But you'll obtain stuff like being immune to sleep, or being able to walk on lava without being a fire type. Hell, the best IQ skill in the game just lets you straight up bust through walls.
Bow down before the awesome might of this huge guy who's carrying the real contestant,
Totodile. However, the majority of these skills are kind of useless for the player character, with most of them being used to improve the AI of your teammates. But weirdly enough, some basic AI functions require higher IQ. Technically makes sense, I suppose. For example, until they learn PP Checker, they'll try and use moves that have run out of PP and waste a turn. You can turn off what moves you don't want them to use, but this does kind of get rid of some of the micromanagement. Strangely enough though, some of these skills can't be toggled on together, like exclusive move user. This makes it so the Pokemon will only use moves and not their standard A attack, but it can't be toggled on with PP Checker. So you can make them use their moves, but not check when the moves have run out of PP. Anyway, it's these moves that can work for and against you. For example, later in the game you'll come across enemies that have moves that can hit the entire room. So once you know what you're dealing with, you're going to want to react accordingly. Despite type matchups being a thing, they don't really have that much effect in the Mystery Dungeon games, so you're going to have to find other avenues to take down these enemies. Even if your move isn't very effective, it'll still do a good chunk of damage. Hell, even electric attacks still do damage to ground types here. Because of the differences between the main series and the Mystery Dungeon games, sometimes it's hard to gauge how powerful a move is, because damage wise, a lot of them seem to do around the same. Even multi-hit moves like Fury Attack, which haunt my dreams. There's a lot of variables, or calling it what it really is, bullshit, that can end your run quick. So you're going to want to prepare your adventures by filling your infuriatingly small inventory with items like Reviver Seeds, Healing Berries, and even food. Yes, food. You actually have a hunger meter, and when this meter runs out, you become famished and your health starts draining quickly. So if you know you're going to be heading into a longer dungeon, you're going to want to prepare accordingly. For a Pokemon game, this is actually quite a challenging one. There's a pretty notorious difficulty spike about halfway through the game, mainly because it limits how many team members you can have because of story events, which is another thing that can be very frustrating in the main story. If your partner faints, it counts as the game over, which is another reason why tactics are so important. Funnily enough though, the spike didn't hit me this playthrough, because while I was doing some job grinding, I forgot to talk to Wishcash to move the plot along. So I recorded about 2 hours worth of me just doing a load of rescue jobs and gaining mad levels, and then I wondered why the plot wasn't moving. Oops. I was also lucky in the fact that Spike occurs in a fire dungeon, and I got Totodile, so I'm perfectly fine being selfish. Now I did mention a job grind, and yeah, unfortunately this is one of my least liked aspects of the game. At certain points in the story you'll be required to work your day job and take rescue requests, returning to dungeons you've already explored to either rescue a troubled Pokemon or bring them an item, or even end up escorting one Pokemon to meet with another. These segments completely kill the pacing of the game, and this is where I can see the complaints about the game being boring becoming more valid. You're still getting new items and rewards for your efforts, but whenever I had to do this in previous playthroughs, I'll do it while watching TV or something else, and when you do that, it's actually quite fun and you get yourself into a bit of a zen-like mode. But when you're recording and having to solely focus on the game, it really does make it apparent how tedious it can be. Fortunately, it doesn't require that many missions to be completed. You can progress faster if you manage to snag multiple missions in one dungeon, but it's still a massive drag to the game's momentum. The game is most fun for me when I'm exploring new dungeons with story relevance, and since you don't know what to expect, things can be quite tense, and that's what keeps me engaged. If you end up dying in the dungeon, you're really going to wish you hadn't, because you lose all of your items and money. So if you got a rare item and die, odds are you're going to be losing it. The game really is quite punishing, so you're going to want to make the most of the hub's facilities. This is Pokemon Square, your home outside of dungeons. Here you'll be able to store items, buy new ones, store your money, link moves together, or go for a grind in the Makahita Dojo. XP grind. The storage especially is crucial since it keeps your rare items safe, most of which you'll be finding in the post-game. Now in every Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, the post-game is usually the bigger part of the adventure, and it all started right here in Red and Blue, and nearly all of the post-game dungeons are hard as nails. They're much longer, they're tougher, they're teaming with stronger Pokemon, and they make full use of monster houses and traps. And traps are, without a doubt, the most enraging thing in the game. Now traps appear late in the main story, but don't become as intrusive until the post-game. These hidden tiles can completely screw over a good run in a matter of seconds. So never get lazy and believe you're doing fine, because it only takes one wrong move and a bit of bad luck, and you could be out of PP, you could be put to sleep, a sticky trap could render one of your items useless, a grimy trap could rot one of your food. At least if you're in a dungeon going down, pitfall traps can help you out, but that is the only mercy traps will show, because otherwise they can be the most frustrating thing. After 70 hours of exploring, you're almost at the top, and oh no, a trap just summoned all the Pokemon in the floor to you, and now you're screwed. Alongside traps we have monster houses. These are rooms usually just littered with goodies, just waiting to be taken. However, a ton of Pokemon will drop down, ambush you, and you'll be lucky if you make it out alive. Stuff like traps and monster houses are the main reason that you really need to do mega prep work before going into a dungeon. I actually can't stress that enough. That's if you can even get to the post-game dungeons. Just look at how you're supposed to unlock these. They have a freaking map and a strategy guide. A map! You're going to want to make use of HMs to get to most of these. Now, luckily, you don't need to learn them. We don't need to bidoof anyone here. You can just have them in your inventory. But these are some of those rare items I was talking about. So if you die, you're going to have to do a lot of busy work before you can even attempt to enter the dungeon again. You can, however,
I'd like to phone a friend.
so if you die in a dungeon, you can send an SOS call out and request a rescue. You can then get a friend to head into the dungeon where you died and they'll revive you. Now this is where Blue Rescue Team players had a bit of an advantage, because in Red Rescue Team, the only options are link cable or the password function, whereas Blue didn't need to mess about with link cables because of the DS's wireless capabilities, although I don't think online rescues are a thing yet. It's a nice option for you to have, but if you're the player waiting to be rescued, there's not really much you can do until your friend is done, if you have one with the game and they are as far as you in the story. There's a lot of things in the game that waste your time, in the same vein as type matchups not mattering as much as you'd expect. Evolution also really doesn't do anything except possibly change your type and ability. You know it's useless when you're more scared of a Spinarak than a Pidgeot. The biggest offender for waste of time though is recruiting the legendaries. Oh boy. So to recruit a Pokemon to your team, you first have to defeat them in battle, and if you have their friend area purchased from Wigglytuff, there'll be a chance that the Pokemon will be able to join you. Each Pokemon has a recruitment rate, which is similar to catch rate in the main games. And nothing sums up the system more than getting absolutely blue-balled. If you manage to make your way to the legendary and defeat it, you'll have a chance at recruiting it. If not, you'll have to do the dungeon all over again. Now this is already completely stupid because some of the post-game dungeons can take a very long time to beat. Imagine if you manage to make your way all the way through the whole dungeon, beat the legendary, then it just decides it doesn't fancy it today and it fucks off. That is hours wasted. Also, you yourself have to be the one to land the killing blow, and it needs to be in the tile next to you, otherwise it will always bugger off. Sometimes it's impossible to recruit them on the first attempt period. That's just such a massive waste of time and is completely unnecessary. This is without a doubt the worst aspect of the game, especially because some dungeons require you to recruit certain legendaries to get to other dungeons. When you do get lucky and they join you, it is immensely satisfying, but it shouldn't be a thing. If you manage to get through a tough dungeon and defeat the boss, you should be rewarded for that, just plain and simple. There are a couple ways to make this easier. For one, some dungeons actually do have save points. Usually you'll have a one-time quick save when you quit the game in a dungeon, but here they are permanent saves. So if you lose, you can just reset and try again quickly. But the very long dungeons, you know, the ones you'd actually need this for, they don't have them, so I guess it just feels pointless. There's also an item called the Friend Bow that ups the recruitment rate, but that just stings more when they still don't join you. Here I am trying to recruit Zapdos 5 times despite him having a 30% recruitment rate. It's because of this that I've never been able to 100% this game. I have gotten close. The adventure log on the main menu keeps a tally of all the achievements you've got on the game pack through multiple saves, and I'm only missing a couple achievements. I have and still want to complete this someday, but only to fulfill what my 12-year-old self started all those years ago. The game looks fantastic for a GBA game. Even on DS it looks good too. The sprites are slick and they're well animated. Well, most of the time. Outside of the character sprites, Pokemon Square looks really good too, with some nice colouring and detail. However, the dungeons with their randomly generated nature look very samey. Some change up their look the further you venture in, which is a nice touch, but some can look almost identical, like Mount Blaze and the start of Magma Cavern. Despite this though, it didn't really bother me, each place did have enough to immerse me in that area. Besides, some dungeons have entrances and pictures of the area before you enter, and these do a great job of showing the scope and scale of the world compared to these tiny Pokemon. The biggest credit I can give to the visuals is the simple but superb character portraits. Each character has a different portrait for each expression, and it adds so much character and charm to the story. They're so integral that it's probably why they're still used to this day, despite the fact that newer games have actual models. But none of that matters. Nothing in this video that I've said so far matters, because we've come to the music. This is possibly currently in this moment of time, right as I'm recording this, my favourite video game soundtrack of all time, along with the Mystery Dungeon Explorers games. Every single track is absolutely bonkers. Every single one fills you with the exact emotion you should feel while exploring these areas. Excitement, triumph, happiness, anger, sadness. They're all captured so brilliantly in this OST. What on earth were the composers on when they made these? It's to the point where the game is almost a sound test for me. Everything revolves around the music. It's one of the main reasons I can't get bored of the game. Despite having to retread areas, it takes a lot for me to get bored when I'm hearing these incredible tunes. The best thing about this game, hands down, the music. It's a big contributor to why I cry at this game every time I play through it. Even at the end when they're all yelling "Fat fucking B," I've still got tears running down my cheeks. Hearing Sky Tower for the first time on any playthrough never gets old. It's one of the all-time greats for Pokemon music. And this is the thing, Pokemon already has incredible music, and to me at least, Red and Blue Rescue Team as a collective outshines anything else in the series. But there is something that I do want to mention, and it's the main reason why I don't regret playing Red Rescue Team. Some of the music in Red Rescue Team is better. I know, right, that's weird to say. Since the DS's speakers had higher quality sound, you'd think it would take the cake in regards to the OST. But I think some of the game's music was made with the Game Boy Advance in mind, since some of the sounds in certain songs, mostly in the Fire and Rock dungeons, are missing. Not only is it missing, but the insane amount of bass that Red Rescue Team offers, that's gone too. But you can really hear it in songs like Mount Blaze, for example, where the choir in the background is completely absent. On the other hand, the softer tunes like Sky Tower do sound better in Blue Rescue Team. Overall though, I do prefer what Red brings to the table. So overall, we're looking at a really fun but flawed game here. It's definitely a game where I have to overlook a lot of its issues. I didn't even really mention how clunky the menus can be. There's not even a multi-select option in the shop. Plus, if you want to recruit team members before an expedition, you have to constantly go back and forth between your base and the friend areas over and over again after every adventure because for some reason it resets it. It's a pain. It's the clunkiness like this that makes the game very rough around the edges, but with that does come some charm. The game's also fairly heavy on the ball, and I'd go as far to say this is the hardest Mystery Dungeon game due to its small inventory, which hinders your ability to deal with the long dungeons in the post-game. But these cons do not outweigh the pros for me, a heartwarming story full of memorable characters that actually affect how I see Pokemon in many different media now. While it is basic and simple, I still believe it can be enjoyed by many today, although if you've played the other games in this series, you'll know that this isn't the best that can be offered. The game looks and sounds amazing. Seriously, musically, it's a freaking masterpiece, and the gameplay loop you could fall into can either make or break your relationship with this game. For me though, I got completely raveled up on it. I just wish that some of the edges weren't so rough and there was a smoother way to play. Oh wait, there is. Yeah, I'd be a bit silly not to mention the remake of these games, Rescue Team DX, released only a few months ago in March of 2020. Besides completely revamping the visuals into a 3D game and retelling the same story, the game has seen many improvements and changes to bring it more in line with the 3DS Mystery Dungeon games. Now for me personally, I do prefer the mechanics and feel of the first two Mystery Dungeon games, Rescue and Explorers. In fact, I think the Explorers games got it pretty much spot on with everything really. Item management, menu navigation, difficulty, there wasn't much they got wrong at all. However, the 3DS titles changed a fair few things. The IQ system for one was now completely gone, the standard A attack was useless and is in fact outright removed in this remake. The dungeons no longer had a template it would stick to of how they'd randomly generate, and especially in Gates to Infinity's case, they'd go on forever because of the small rooms and long corridors. But one of the main new things introduced in these games was a move upgrade system, which the whole combat was balanced around. The majority of these changes to the formula, while I didn't dislike per se, I do prefer how the games used to work, and because of that I was worried about how this remake would play. Now for the most part it does feel very similar to the 3DS titles, but the game does at least try to combine the newer mechanics with the older ones, most notably the IQ system. Instead of eating gummies to increase your IQ, you can out-earn Rainbow and DX gummies that can be eaten in friend areas. If you're lucky they'll give you a rare quality, which is like a special ability that the IQ skills used to give. Now these aren't the same as those old skills, but there are a lot of them and there's all kinds of effects, like restoring PP when you run out, increasing your team's defense, or getting items cheaper at the Kecleon shops in dungeons. There's actually quite a few here, and although some of them are actually quite busted and make the game feel quite automated at times, I think I do prefer this system to the old one. There's barely any grind at all, and you can change what rare quality you have by eating more gummies. They're also only available through new treasure chests you can find within dungeons, and also through rewards you can get from jobs, so there's actually more incentive to do these now. Not only that, but the ranks you earn by completing more jobs now have way better perks, like increasing the amount of jobs you can take, and increasing your toolbox size!
Alright.
Not only is your toolbox bigger, but menus, while a little stylish over speed sometimes, have been completely overhauled and it makes the micromanagement a million times better than before. Hell, you can go into the dungeon select screen and arrange your items and team there. No more need for running laps between the storage and friend areas. It saves you so much time and I'm really grateful for it. Speaking of friend areas though, some might be disappointed that you can no longer enter each area. Each one is now a simple menu with a nice illustration and the original game sprites of each Pokemon you have. This is actually a really nice Easter egg and I'm glad they found a way to get them at least in here somehow. Now like I said before, this game definitely feels more like the 3DS titles than the original games. There's actually quite a lot of little changes as well, but I'll just go over the ones that I think matter the most. So the standard attack is no longer here, instead the game will pick out the best move for the scenario if you press the A button. You can shortcut and select any move this time along with items like before, although with the AI being as good as it is in this game, they'll go through your thrown items faster than you can even use them, so don't think you'll be using any of those. The worst part is there isn't a way to tell them to stop either, like in the tactics. The AI is almost too good in this game, to the point where they'll do things sometimes that make you feel like, once again, the game is playing itself, especially when it happens in conjunction with their rare qualities. This does bring me to say that I found the remake heaps easier than the original. There's not even a difficulty spike this time round. Just look at my levels in the original compared to the remake, and I still had more trouble in the original. The game is just so generous with the items it gives you. I had so many bloody reviver seeds I was passing over them in the shops. The mechanics are just very skewed in your favour. For example, now you can have up to 8 team members in a dungeon now. Just look at this nonsense. Am I playing Mystery Dungeon or Pikmin? You can even recruit members in story dungeons now. I was the life of the flipping party when I walked in on this monster house. Everyone wanted to suckle on this Team Rorock's teat. You can play this game on autopilot, I feel, and there's not too many times where it feels like you actually need to think, which is what kept me engaged in the original. Hell, sometimes you'll just do your move twice in one turn for seemingly no reason, which brings me to say there's not really any satisfaction in leveling up this time. In the original, when I finally got Water Gun after just having Scratch and Rage for so long, it felt absolutely fantastic. I felt so much stronger, but here you have a really good moveset from the get-go, so it never really felt that satisfying to get new moves and level up, especially when Kecleon is selling insanely good TMs as early as the second dungeon. Despite these many factors making the game a hell of a lot easier, it does seem they've tried to combat this in some ways. Traps are in every dungeon now, though they don't get as lethal until the post-game. And some like the Mankey Gang in Uproar Forest actually pose a threat this time round. For some boss fights, they actually tried throwing some spanners in the mix. Like with Groudon, the magma underneath him will slowly spread and eventually burn you if you stay on that tile. Rayquaza randomly warps you and your teammates to different spots in the room. I can see what they're trying to do, but this really does come off as more annoying than introducing challenge. I definitely prefer the way the bosses were handled in the original game. It's quite hard to implement any kind of strategy against the bosses this time because like in the 3DS games, the bosses recover very quickly from status conditions, so you can just flat out waste your turn or an item because they decide to heal. But don't let the last few minutes of complaining fool you. This remake does a lot of good as well, especially in the post-game. Every complaint I have of the post-game in the original is now essentially gone. For starters, there's no more requiring HMs to go anywhere, which does make some dungeons insignificant to be fair. No more chancing if a legendary will join your team or not. They always do. They are much harder this time round though, verging on complete bull. Kyogre for example you have to beat, then it primal reverts and gets all its health back. I thought this was stupid. I thought it was really silly, especially because it also has the switching places malarkey from Rayquaza. I'm obviously not the only one who struggled here, because looking at all the online SOSs people have put out for the end of Stormy Sea, it seems like this is a problem for a lot of people. I don't know, I would have loved it if they kept it the same but just removed HMs and made legendaries join you every time. I think they wanted to stop you being able to do all the post-game stuff straight away, because in the original, if you play strategically, you kinda can. Whereas here, it seems the game wants you to grind levels first, but thinking strategically was definitely more rewarding to me. It felt like I was overcoming the odds. Anyway, sorry, I was talking about the good stuff. Your partner stays in the fold and acts like your partner after the main game this time round, which is very much appreciated. Evolution actually increases your stats this time. There's just so many little changes too that really it does make it a much more comfier experience in the original games. There's even additional dungeons, which is nice to have, and a lot of them have music from the 3DS games, which while I don't personally rate anywhere close to the first two games in the series, it's nice to know that they're here, as I know a lot of people enjoy them. In fact, one thing I can say this remake absolutely nails without question is the music, which I was worried about because the softer music of the 3DS games was a bit of a letdown for me, even though I still enjoyed them. But I had no need to worry. DX has essentially made every song clearer and just slightly remixed. This is the perfect way to remix game music. Nothing too crazy, just tweaking the original just a tiny bit, and it all sounds incredible. It does seem they took more inspiration from Blue Rescue Team because Mount Blaze's choir still is in there, but the fact that they've still got some GBA boops and beeps in there really shows they treat this soundtrack with the love and care it deserves. Something DX made me realise is how good the friend area themes are. I never really paid too much attention to them before, but these updated tracks are some of the catchiest in the game, one of my favourites being the Darkness Ridge theme. I really can't exclaim how much of a good job they did with the game's music, which to me in this game's case is the most important part. Visuals for the game, however, are a bit mixed. The backgrounds and all around look of the game looks fantastic. I think the storybook almost watercolour setting really suits the series, and they should stick with it for the future. On the other hand, the character models look incredibly basic. It looks like they've been straight up ripped from the 3DS games, which I can tell you right now the character portraits definitely have. Some look plain hideous. What the hell is up with Ekans? What have they done to you? Animation, another Pokemon specialty, is also insanely basic. Admittedly, they make it work for the new cutscenes. The choreography, I guess, is good, but overall, this comes straight from a handheld game. Whether this was intentional or not, it's lazy and looks very cheap, which contrasts awfully with the excellent look of everything else in the game, mainly the backgrounds and environments. Now this is where I have to bring up the game's pricing, which I don't usually do because I don't usually review all the games in this style, but this game is £50. It's £50. It's the most handheld game I think I've ever played on Switch, and you can probably find it for around 40 if you look around enough, but that's probably the cheapest you're going to find it currently, and considering it's a Pokemon game, it's not likely to go down in price anytime soon, and I just cannot stress how much this is not worth £40, or 50 for that matter. It should be around 20 to 25 at the most in my opinion, and regardless of my verdict on this game, I would not buy it for the current price that it's selling at. I was a fool, but I blame current world events for that, so safe? So after saying all this, where does this leave the game in my thoughts? Well, I'm honestly quite mixed on it, but I think a lot of that comes from preferring the old mechanics and the way those games felt. This game you have to play a bit differently to the original, taking advantage of its new additions and changed mechanics. But the things it genuinely improves on makes for a much more comfortable experience, which I can recommend to someone wanting to get into the series. However, making it more comfortable does mean it loses a lot of rewarding and satisfaction you get from doing well, especially in the harder dungeons. Even with its improvements to the UI and menus, some things still make me scratch my head. Like, why can't I control what moves Pokemon who have just joined my team use? Because I'm stuck with this shit. I don't think there's much more I can say about this one. It smoothed out some of the rough edges from the original, but those rough edges sometimes kept me engaged and entertained. These games aren't for everyone, but I do think it says a lot when I can play these two back to back. I'll not really feel burnt out or mega bored at any point. Weirdly enough, in some weird way, I think these games' flaws actually make them more appealing to me. And the soundtrack. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to be a Pokemon, give these games a go. I'm sure you'll find something that's slightly entertaining there at least. But if you do, I will warn you, get those tissues at the ready. Don't cry, Caterpie!